up. So we'll share that detail on the page soon, and a couple of very interesting talks after that. So all that will be up in a week's time on the page. If you need to access our past talks with, for example, Pernilla Nisler were here from Blockhead, Dio Resi was here, Camilla was here. So all these interesting talks about different topics are there. You can check them. Big thanks to our partners in this process. You guys are awesome. You're making it happen and getting the community out there to the community. So Startup Grind is there and making a difference in the ecosystem. So thank you, all our partners, Companion, Devrel Events, Make Trade, and Sweden on the Go. And big thank you to the chapter team. So Oleg, my co-director, Jens, who was our mentor from Hong Kong, Amanda, Marina, and Beryl. You guys are doing awesome. So I'll stop sharing my screen. That got a little long, and I'm going to bring you in, Johan, so that we can jump onto our chat now. Let's see if I can locate you here. Yes, Johan, you're up. So you'll get the same pop-up which says that you need to enable the controls. Presenter mode on. Here we go.
Hello there.
Hi, Johan. Thank you so much for being here. You were enjoying rain a little while ago. I envy you. I'm just sitting here in this place, box of a room in the home. Yeah. But thank you so much for being here. We are very excited to hear about your journey, about FishBrain, and a warm welcome to Startup Grind Stockholm. And I'd like to start that you are a serial entrepreneur and you have a passion of building businesses. So tell us a little bit about your journey before FishBrain. Yeah.
So first of all, thanks and happy to be here, and good to see all of you in the chat here. But yeah, where do I start? I've been an entrepreneur for 15 something years, but that's actually not where I started out my career. I started out my career in academia. So I got a, believe it or not, a degree in mathematics and physics. I got a master's, and then I went straight for a PhD in AI. Note, this is long before the hype, so this is not for joining the AI bandwagon or something like that. It's actually for a genuine interest in mathematics and physics. So I did that for a few years, spent 1 year in Copenhagen, Nordic Institute for Theoretical Physics, which was really hardcore. I studied a lot, but also, this is Denmark, so also drank a lot of beer. So it was a good combination of work, studying super hard and drinking quite a few beers. But then I moved over to Santa Fe and the Santa Fe Institute, which is in New Mexico, which is this, it's a very small cross-disciplinary institute where they're famous in economy, biology, mathematics, and physics. And so I did part of my PhD over there. And there I got super excited because and also remember I was 20 something, so I was also very young and very naive. And now I'm just naive. I'm not young anymore. But because some of these professors over there, not just were they fantastic in what they did, many of them also started a couple of companies. Some of them quite successfully. It's this American entrepreneurial spirit. So and again, me being young and naive, I thought, hey, I can do the same. And so I thought that while continuing my PhD, I would launch a startup and run both in parallel. And of course, that didn't work out. Of course, it didn't. I was successful with the startup because that actually took off. But that was the end of my career in academia. So I never finished my PhD. I don't have a doctoral degree. I don't think I will ever pick it up again. But you never know. But not as it looks here. But I started a company. Long story short, but it was all using AI for solving computer problems. Raised some venture capital there, and every startup is a roller coaster. We definitely had quite a few ups and downs, but somehow, don't ask me how, but we managed to get profitable, which is almost unheard of these days. Even if you're Spotify have had some quarters where they're actually profitable, but in general they're not. But with that company, I moved to Silicon Valley in 2007. And then we got some good momentum. We got some big corporate clients like AT&T, Symantec, even Microsoft as a customer. And since we did for the Windows, what we did was for the Windows operating system. We thought it doesn't get any better than this. So we used a banker, and then the business was acquired by a company on the East Coast, outside Boston. So which was good. So I moved, left after many years in Silicon Valley. I left for the East Coast, for Boston. And then I was locked in for a year and a half, which is pretty typical when you sell a business. There's always a lock-in period because they believe, the buyer thinks you are so important for the business, which is not the case. I was definitely not important for that business any longer. I might have been in the early days, but not 7-8 years after. But anyhow, so, and I felt pretty much immediately this is not where I want to end my life. Nothing wrong with the buyer, but it was one of those big companies, and focus was growing the business 1-2% per year. Okay. I like when you're growing 100% plus per year. I think that's the exciting part, not the 1-2% growth per year phase. But during that time, I could do angel investing. So I invested in a bunch of companies. I joined boards. I did speaking gigs. But coming to today's topic, I actually spent a fair bit of time thinking about what should be my next company. And given my background in mathematics and physics, I think in numbers. So I was thinking about what are the next macro trends that I believe in. And of course, it's not I have a crystal ball that you don't have, or an Sequoia or Greylock or Andreessen Horowitz or Goldman Sachs. But come on, knowing that you will work for the next 5 to 10 years with little or no pay in the first year and huge risk, and the most likely outcome is that you will fail. But you have at least you have to believe in it. So I came to two conclusions that I think are pretty obvious today. They weren't 7 years ago when we started FishBrain. And the first one is, if you have a passion for something, doesn't matter what it is. If it's cooking, or if it's sailing, or if it's photography or whatever, you will have a much better engagement, I think, if you're in a group of like-minded or peers versus a group of friends. Because if you look at if you post any speciality content on like a Facebook or on an Instagram or a TikTok, you get very, very low engagement. Because these are designs for friends. So this type of content that works on these platforms are content that everyone can engage with and appreciate, like party pictures, food, kittens and stuff like that. And also from a user behavior perspective, it's a browse experience. You look at the feed, if this is Instagram or TikTok or Facebook, there's no search behaviors. That means that these platforms are not designed for evergreen content. And then when you go vertical, there's a bunch of content that's evergreen, that's relevant not just today, but relevant a year from now or 2 years from now, and stuff like that. And also, I'm actually old enough to seen when the web was bigger than mobile. There were those super successful and very highly engaged online user forums with millions and millions of monthly active users. They sort of went away when Facebook came. And there were groups, you can tag stuff on Instagram, but it doesn't really connect this group of like-minded people. So that was number one. Number two, that I am a big believer in, I think there are a lot of untapped business opportunity around crowdsourcing of data, especially using the mobile device. And of course, like a Facebook, they use it for targeting ads. And if you look at their quarterly report, they do pretty okay over there in Menlo Park. But personally, I really like businesses like Waze, where you crowdsource traffic information and you deliver a great service for the customers. I use it every day in San Francisco and Boston. I don't need it in Stockholm, but if you think there's traffic in Stockholm, go to San Francisco or Boston. But again, I think there are a lot of these opportunities. So I actually wrote a blog post saying that I thought there would be an opportunity around vertical social networks, and especially for the hobbies and passions, where you can actually take this data, crowdsource a data set directly from the customers, the users, and turn it back as a service for the users. And this was published by this Silicon Valley tech blog, Pando Daily. And I got a ton of feedback. I got feedback directly from Mark Andreessen at Andreessen Horowitz. I got feedback from Sequoia. I got feedback from Greylock. Oh, basically everyone that invested in Facebook. So, so I say, hey, I might be onto something here. And the thing is, I'm not an avid angler. I know how to fish. There are a lot of articles saying that I'm not a fisherman. That's actually not true. But it's not my biggest passion. I've been a competitive cyclist for 10 years. I'm definitely better, even though I suck at it today. But when I was younger and less fat, I was quite good at cycling. But so I looked at the number of verticals, and the reason I decided to start going to fishing, there were a couple of reasons. First of all, there was this article in Forbes listing the world's 10 largest hobbies. And guess what? Sport fishing was number one. There are 50 million Americans that fish every year. They spend $50 billion every year. To put the number in perspective, the global music industry is a $20 billion industry. So there are many, they spend a boatload of money. It's also very global. It's big in China, it's big in Brazil, Russia, in many countries in Europe, Sweden, definitely for sure. But there's also a lot of, when looking vertical, you really have to have content that users are willing to share, and ideally already do this today, so you don't have to change user behavior. And that content has to be visual, because people, they don't have limited bandwidth, and attention span is limited. That content has to be either images, photos, or ideally videos. Just look at TikTok as a perfect example of that, which is 100% video based. And that's definitely the case in fishing, because most fishing is catch and release, meaning that the angler doesn't keep the fish. So that means already today they're always taking a picture, or increasingly so a video. So the content is there. And then the opportunity I saw around on the data side is the fact that if you ask 100 avid anglers when, where, and how to fish, you will get exactly 100 different answers. And the ex-mathematician in me told me that cannot be right. It's just because that one angler can only fish that much, similar to one driver can only drive that much. But if you aggregate a lot of traffic data, you can actually draw conclusions from that. So at FishBrain, we started to gather a ton of very, very granular sport fishing data. Not just the location and species, but also the method. What was the weather? Was it sunny? Was it cloudy? What's the moon phase, the tide, the current, the humidity, air pressure, water temperature, wind speed, wind direction, humidity, boom, everything. And then we apply machine learning. And now 7 years later, we have a scientific fishing forecast, which is basically the blockbuster and the key selling point in our subscription version. So
somewhere the academic side came out, like that mathematician, and also the AI side that you talked about. So I think it reflected. So I think it's really, really, really amazing how this journey has been. And what I really liked when you started talking about that, you had that time with you, and then you started studying those macro trends, and then you had a two-sided approach, like the passion side, and then there was crowdsourcing data. Those were the two cuts. And suddenly there were also some market changes, which is, of course, the text went out of fashion when the web switched to mobile. So I think that's a huge change or switch that happened. And many networks or many online services didn't evolve. So those who evolved or were able to catch on that trend, that was good. And I think you made a very deep point about social networks there when you said that why are you on social network? Is it browse versus search? I think that's a very, very simple branching point which can determine so really, really good. How were the early days of your venture? Like, what were the struggles? What were the things which eventually led to what you are today? Like,
first of all, I think every startup is a challenge. I haven't seen one exception to that, including a Klarna and a Spotify and even these today's super successful companies been through. They've all been roller coasters, and so has FishBrain. Because the thing is, and this is the way I think in general, it's not success is you don't have to be first. We were definitely not the first. We had 15 competitors when we started. So we knew, and that was Spotify wasn't the first music service. There's been Klarna wasn't the first payment provider. There's been Strava, who's done this very, very successfully in the cycling space, and I know the founder Michael. They were not the first fitness app. There were plenty before they started. So it's important to be the first to hit this tipping point. It's critical mass of users.
Okay.
Because when you look at vertical social, there is a brutal market dynamics. Because especially when your service is built upon the data, there's actually a double network effect, because you want to be on the same platform as your buddies that also do the same hobby. So if you're in cycling, you want to be on the same platform as your real world cycling buddies.
Okay.
And same in fishing. You want to make sure that your real world fishing buddies are on the platform. So first of all, you have the social graph, whether this is depending on the hobby, the fishing graph or the cycling graph or the cooking graph or the photography graph or the baseball graph or whatever. But then you also want to be on the platform with the most amount of data, because that's how you deliver value. Because look at Waze. There have been so many companies trying to, there's a better take on traffic than Waze, but no one has succeeded. Okay. And they struggled to get to the critical mass of users. That boom didn't happen overnight. They worked for quite a few years before they actually hit this tipping point. So for us, we knew in the very beginning that this would be a tough ride, and everyone told me this will never work, because look at Facebook, look at Instagram. Why there's no need for vertical social networks? I told them, I think you're wrong. I think I'm right. As a naive entrepreneur, you're stubborn, because otherwise you get nowhere. But we focused a lot on making. We took a different approach than our competitors. We actually focused on usability, not on features. So we had fewer features than our competitors, but we tried to make them easier to use. We worked on the onboarding. We worked more on the social side than on the utility side. And but it was by no means easy. And we raised venture capital early, including Nordzone, who invested in Spotify, and I think most unicorns out of Scandinavia. And they're happy to have them. They've supported the business in multiple rounds, including the latest. But the thing, since we had competition, we knew we needed to be the first one to hit this critical mass of users. And the network effects are actually local. Okay. So even if I decided, after being out of the country for many years, we moved back to Sweden and started a company in Stockholm, not in Silicon Valley. And we can talk about that later, because I think I'm very happy today that I did. But it absolutely wasn't obvious 7 years ago that Stockholm was actually the place to start a company. But today I'm happy I did that choice and not move back to Silicon Valley. But that also meant, because these strong network effects, and since they're local, even though we started the company in Sweden, we went immediately for the market we knew we needed to win, which is the US market. Okay. So, which is very, very un-Swedish. Most Swedes, or a company start here, they start in the local market. They want to, I hate the word MVP, but whatever. They want to get a working product and some revenue, and then they scale. We said, screw that. Let's go for the biggest market first. We don't have time to learn in the Swedish market.
But that's a very interesting point about MVP, because the entire advisory industry structures, the accelerators, the startups, they're always focusing you on developing a very narrow tunnel, which can be validated multiple points. And then you kind of go like almost you are like treading on the rope carefully. So I don't know. We had an opposing view to that when we interviewed Magnus Grimland from Antler a few months ago. And he was on the other side. He was like, it's the passion, it's the drive, that's
I mean, I think you can combine the best of both, because I think there's definitely passion needed, and if you're not bold, I don't think you get anywhere. Okay. Because it's fiercely competitive. You're fighting today we're not fighting with direct competitors, we're fighting with people's bandwidth in general. So I think you have to be bold. I think what's being too data driven or MVP, it's so easy you get stuck speaking in mathematical terms in a local maxima, because you're optimizing here, but it might be here's the global maxima. And being so at FishBrain and also at all the other companies that I'm advising, you should 100% be data driven. I'm not saying that you should screw data, of course not, but you should know where, okay, here's if this is a funnel that you want to optimize, or do you actually think there's a bigger maxima somewhere else? So I think you need to find a healthy balance between optimizations and big bets, knowing the majority of bets will fail. But if you don't make these big bets, you will be stuck at the local maxima for sure. And what I don't like in the MVP, how can you actually know what's the minimum? I know there are so many companies that given up because they should have done one more iteration, because maybe it wasn't, if they worked on it for one more week or one more month, depending on how complex it is, they could have struck gold. But of course, there's always also cases where they worked too long and they should have given up because they were not even close to having a market fit here. But I think in the early stages, it's 100% passion.
And very important point when you looked at the US market, because I'm trying to create a very simple analogy for our listeners. So you cannot actually judge your own interest in jogging if you are jogging in your room. You won't get the feeling. You need to change the context. So maybe at an MVP stage, maybe you are too much hard boxed into something. So it's very important to think outside the box and see where this can work. But amazing points over there. You touched about the point of Stockholm a little bit while you were discussing, and you have been in multiple ecosystems. You have worked in US as well. My point is, how do you see Stockholm versus other ecosystems, or for example, US, where you have worked? Are we too conservative? Are we too methodical? I'm just putting a few words there. Maybe we can start.
I think like any city, there are pros and cons with every city or every startup hub. And I've been working in three. I've been working in Stockholm. I've been an entrepreneur in Silicon Valley and in Boston. So I've tried 3 different places. So I cannot speak about the others. But when I left Sweden 2007, it was really, really hard to be an entrepreneur in Stockholm. For a number of reasons. First of all, there hadn't been that many successes, because I definitely think that success breeds success. Basically, Niklas Zennström of Skype was the only one back then. And there wasn't, so the talent pool was really small. There weren't that many people that actually built successful companies, at least not at scale, which meant that there were also not that much venture capital there. So there were a lot of different constituents that didn't exist in Stockholm. So hence why I knew I needed to, for growing my first company big, you needed to move to Silicon Valley, because everything in tech more or less gravitated towards that. But now I think things are very, very different in Stockholm in a positive way. I think first of all, there are definitely multiple successes. There are a lot of unicorns, whatever. But successful companies in general, it's not about the valuation. But I think they built a lot of great companies in Stockholm. Spotify, Klarna, you have the King. There's a bunch of them, and there's also a very, very good pay it forward attitude. A lot of these entrepreneurs, they help the next generation by not just by investing a little bit, some angel investing, but also with advice and opening up their network. Good example for FishBrain is Daniel Ek has been super helpful for me doing some introductions. Super thankful for that, they were key in the early days. And now I've built my own network, so I try to pay it forward as much as I can. And also with success also comes money, because when they see that, there's actually a value created, money created for investors here, of course that attracts more money into the ecosystem. So I would say now, at least in the early stages, there's a lot of capital available, both from at an angel phase, at the seed, pre-seed and seed round, and an A round. A little bit less so when it comes to scaling a company, like a B or a C round. we did our starting FishBrain, we started our Series B. That was the first round that was actually globally led and not locally led. And but I think in the early stages there is definitely plenty of capital available here. Then, of course, not everything is great in Stockholm, and I think this is. I think again, even though I lived in the States for many years, that doesn't make me American. I suck at marketing. I think Swedes in general suck at marketing.
Okay.
This is America. It's really, really hard to beat an American when it comes to marketing. And but you have to compensate for that. Our CMO at FishBrain, Lisa Kennelly, she's American. She's based here in Stockholm. But I think what you couldn't really do 10 years ago was to attract talent to come to Stockholm. Now you can. Yeah. You can. So we have I think we have 15 people that are Americans working in the office in Stockholm. And that would never happen in 2007 for sure. It was impossible to attract anyone to come to Stockholm, at least as an entrepreneur in 2007. Today it's very, very different.
So it's the evolution.
But again, on sales and marketing in general, I shouldn't generalize. But we suck at it compared to America. We suck. We're good at tech. We're semi-good at product, but we're not very good at sales and marketing. And you should know that. And we are, because when speaking about monetization on the FishBrain platform, we always have these debates internally. Oh, should we really charge for that? Shouldn't that feature be free? Those discussions wouldn't exist in Silicon Valley. But boom, fuck, let's put it behind the paywall. It's all about monetization. So it's yeah.
So it's marketing, and I think that's a very interesting point that you make, because even at a very early stage startup level, people sit on ideas. They don't. So validation, talking to customer, that's also a fear. Many startups at very early stage have that fear wall. So you need to break that fear wall, which becomes your firewall to growth somehow. So I think marketing is key at an early stage, and so really good. Building FishBrain in early stage versus where it is now, what are the differences or what are the similarities? Like, you have worked it you created it, and then you are on it, and you raised 263 million crowns recently. That was out in the media. How is it different between those two stages? What's the main difference between those two stages?
There are definitely differences and similarities, because I need to talk about a little bit about the evolution of the company to put this in perspective. Because the first 3 years, I think I mentioned, we didn't monetize because we knew we needed to hit this critical mass of users, the tipping point ahead of the competition. So then it was very, very product focused, not on monetization, but actually getting a decent enough user experience. So we are not just getting users, but they also stick around. So we're looking at retention and growing that user base first. Then I think 3 or 4 years ago, we turned on monetization through a subscription. And it's a freemium model. So it's free to download FishBrain, but if you want to have access to data, that's behind the paywall. So which meant we again needed to innovate. Because then the social side, which was the free side, it never really works as well as you want it to, frankly. But again, it's sort of worked good enough for us to raise some money and actually get to the next stage. But then we needed to innovate again on the paid side. How do we actually get subscribers? Going from an audience business, adding a subscription, frankly, that wasn't that hard. But then again, so we did that for a couple of years. Now we needed, and then it became to a stage where now it's more about optimizing that again. Looking at FishBrain today, here again, it's less innovation. It's more, we have a roadmap. We know here are the things we need to do. We do a lot of A/B testing here around different messagings, paywalls, price points. So on that side of the house, it's more in a stage where we want to continue to grow at the 50-100% growth rate. But mostly through optimizations and adding value. But then we added a new thing. This is again a year and a half ago or something like that, which is a second revenue stream. And this is absolutely not rocket science, because if we can, or the only one that can give recommendations, if you want to go fish for say trout in Lake Tahoe in California in May. Here's the best equipment to do that job. It's a pretty darn good commerce opportunity. Yeah. So we and again, me being not all young anymore, but naive, still naive. That was let's build a marketplace because we don't want to have an e-commerce model where we take the inventory risk and limited supply and stuff like that. So let's build this on the marketplace model. Oh my goodness, that was hard. It took more than a year to build, because then you have to integrate with all the sellers and product images and descriptions and price points and stock levels, and paying tax in the US is actually different by zip code. But again, so I would say where we are right now, it's still a lot about innovation. It's a tiny revenue stream compared to our subscription revenue stream. So one side of the business is innovating, the other is more optimizing, and that makes it actually hard in a company to run two fundamentally different approaches. One where you actually need to really come up with, it's not about optimizing, it's actually doing bigger things, making quite bold bets. Where on the subscription side, it's more optimization, because we also cannot screw things up, because we cannot jeopardize the revenue stream. So it's we have to be a little bit more careful on that side. Still need to improve, and we want to make things better and reduce the churn and increase conversion and stuff like that. But on the marketplace, on the commerce side, here's more innovation.
And in your experience, because of course you've been dealing with it for past 1.5 years when you went into the marketplace model. Is it the entire team works on two sides, or do you need to have different teams working on on those two things? And then how do you integrate them up into the business?
A great question, which is very hard. But the way we are structured, not saying that that's the right structure, but that's the way we run, is we have cross-functional teams. And these are teams with around 8 people. And so they have a target that they run with. One can be a commerce target, one can be a subscription revenue target. And they are more or less have all the flexibility to whatever needed to actually hit their targets. Of course, that doesn't mean that every organization is a matrix organization. If you're not, you're lying. Because of course you cannot build on one team cannot work on a completely different UI, UX, fonts, look and feel, technology, everything. So we have guilds between the teams. So there has to be syncs between the teams. But I think what's most important, even at our stage now, it's about velocity. If someone runs faster, they will beat you. So of course, you can. If everything is completely aligned, that slows you down. You don't get the velocity you want. Does that make the shit hit the fan? Of course it does. But you cannot have everything. Life is give and take. You have. If you prioritize velocity, then there will be some things that will happen because of that. But that's part of this. But we definitely have different teams. We don't have one team working on 2 revenue streams. We have different teams working on different facets of the business. We also have team working on, for example, retention of free users. So we have different metrics. Every team should have 1 or 2 metrics that they run after.
I think that's good. The point on velocity and matrix based teams. Great. Let's jump to, so we discussed team and how you're structured, how you're following the innovation side as well as the optimization side. So 2 legs. So I think it's very, very interesting. If we go a little bit about into your funding journey, because initially you said you hit revenues much later. So initial 2 to 3 years was about building that critical mass of users. And that's also very interesting because many startups are faced with a fundamental question. What's the best way to build this business? Should we build the community first? How big the community needs to be? And then what's the investor interest? What were your challenges in your journey of critical mass building? Let's take that stage. When you were trying to achieve that and you didn't have big numbers on the revenue side to show.
I think here you definitely need to look at what are the VCs investing in right now. And the challenge I had is that not very many people believe. Now everyone talks about the unbundling of social. There's a fantastic article series by Andreessen Horowitz around this. They call it Social Plus, the next generation of social. Not very many investors actually believed in that. I think we had our first app in the market 2013. This is 8 years ago. Time flying. So I definitely needed to convince the investors that there's business here. The unbundling will happen. So I had to spend a lot of time storytelling, and very, very happy to have both. We had Swedish Industrifonden and Northzone. They made a huge bet at a very, very early stage in FishBrain, which I'm super grateful for. Today, I think it's actually much easier for now talking specifically about vertical social, because a lot of investors do believe in this macro trend. We have one investor that invested in FishBrain, came in 2018, 3 years ago. Then there was B Capital, and they're lesser known. They have two, basically in the first fund, they have two limited partners. One was BCG, the consulting firm. The other was the lesser known Facebook co-founder, Eduardo Severin. So he's been highly engaged in FishBrain. And he's definitely seen Facebook from the inside, and he is a strong believer in the unbundling of social. And same with the other investor that came into our Series B was SoftBank. It was also a macro trend driven investment in FishBrain, because they believed in two macro trends. One is the vertical commerce and the unbundling of social. So vertical social. So I think today you don't have to spend time convincing the VCs that there is actually business to be made in vertical social. There are so many examples of billion-dollar plus valuation companies in vertical social. But then you have to compensate. So they buy into that. But then you have to show some numbers. You have to show not in the early stages. It's not about revenues. It's about how do you get users and how do you get them to stick around. So conversion funnel and retention cohorts.
So getting users and getting them to stick around. But I think what I picked up here was something very interesting, which you were mentioning, and I was just jotting down a few words. Like you had to go very deep into the trends and how social was kind of taking shape at that time. So that's one learning, and I'll come back to the community on that side. And the other thing was that you went around and put a lot of focus on storytelling. And then these people came in and made the bets. So I think for the journal entrepreneurship community who is listening to us today, this is very, very important. When you are, and remember, Johan started with a word when we were talking about social networks, word passion. So the passion needs to be there. If you have a passion, connect it, go out and search trends. What can you identify in the market which makes you unique? But then Johan said that you really don't need to be the only one out there. There could be a situation when there are other players already in the market, in many cases more than 10 players. But then what makes it important for others to jump on the bandwagon is your storytelling, the power of your team or yourself to show a vision which is promising. So really, really great points. You're also involved, you said that you have been involved in boards and other startups, and you're also involved in Sting. Tell me about that experience, how that is. You're part of the ecosystem building process. How is that coming along?
I think I do that for a couple of reasons. First of all, I know I don't know everything. And I think that's some entrepreneurs that think they know everything, and I don't think that's very healthy. And first of all, it's never true to start with. So I actually, of course, over the years you accumulate some knowledge. You've seen things working, and also seen a lot of things not working, because most things don't work. That's just the nature of the game. But also I learn a lot from being on board. I learn a lot. You mentioned Sting. I'm on the advisory board of Sting. Then you get to see a lot of Sting companies there, and they're pitching. And And I also learn because the way I'm doing things or we are doing things, FishBrain is definitely not a one-man band. We have fantastic people, but it doesn't make the thing we are doing things right. It's I think I get a lot of inspiration working with some smaller and bigger companies. So you get, and it's not like there are any competitions. It's not like so it's and I think that it's over. People don't talk enough about the importance of stellar execution. It's idea is important, but again, someone said 5%. But I don't really. You cannot put a number to 5% idea, 95% execution. I think it's wrong to call it that. But whatever. I think it's about execution, and you see how other companies do things and what's working for them. Now, for sure, that there's been. With COVID-19, where we had almost 100% we had a 100% on-site culture. Boom! In a week, we went from working in the office to not at all working in the office. Now we're sort of a hybrid. I think that it's definitely helped me seeing how other companies, both in Sweden and in the States, have tackled that. So I don't think, in general, I don't think we should, as an entrepreneur, you should be innovative where innovation is needed. The rest, learn from the best. Copy. I take pride in not inventing everything on our own, for sure. But again, coming back, it sounds like a Swedish mellanmjölk. But it's finding the right balance. It's also identifying where you need to be innovative. Coming back to FishBrain, of course. So the social is very, very important part of FishBrain because fishing is so bragging driven. That doesn't mean that we can just copy the things that are working on Facebook and TikTok and Instagram. We have to take the basics, yes, but we need to put a twist to it. It cannot just be, but some parts like direct messaging. Direct messaging is direct messaging. It's no need for innovation. Groups are groups. So again, it's finding this where do we not need to innovate and where do we need to innovate. So we actually have one of the principles at FishBrain is innovate core and copy the rest, which is always easier said than done because what's really core and what's but again.
But it's a great point that you make. That I think innovation for the sake of innovation, to the extent that you limit yourself inside a box, is always going to be a challenge. It'll have huge costs if you're trying to create everything on your own. So I think your point makes sense. It also makes entrepreneurs focus on sensing the market, whatever is out there, whatever is working, take that. And then try and put your own brand to that or your own way to that. And the word brand over there, what's the marketing strategy? How important is marketing in building a startup like yours? Did you go in creating a very, very distinct brand identity, really thought like marketers, or did the startup itself the product itself had enough appeal to the market because it was the vertical that made sense to people? So something over there, if you could shed light on.
For sure. And here, this is here I will speak specifically for vertical social because I think the go-to-market strategy is completely different in different for different businesses. So here, this is an example where generalizing is super dangerous. But for us, it has been. We have I would say in the early stage, it's been very, very product driven.
Okay.
We've sucked at marketing. We didn't really put a lot of effort into building the brand, and it wasn't like it's you can only focus on that many things, especially in the early days when you have very, very few people. Now we are over 100 people, so now we are starting to think and have brilliant people that actually work on the brand. But in the early days, you don't really have the luxury to be good at everything. But you need to decide where do you want to be, where do you have to be really good.
Okay.
And we decided on the product, but that doesn't mean. And I think this is a little bit. Everyone's looking. It's asking about how viral is your growth. I said, screw that. This is again. It's about how can you actually. What is the go-to-market strategy? How can you grow user base? Then it's always a question of whether is your LTV, lifetime value, greater than your CAC, customer acquisition cost. if that's true, then you're stupid if you don't put more money into marketing. And if you can retain a positive unit economics where LTV is greater than CAC, you should be spending on marketing. I think that's a little bit, and look at how many companies are truly viral today. Not that many. And the ones that are, they definitely become unicorns, and they become decacorns because they basically won, at least at scale. In the early days, you can always get some users, and you make the mistake of saying, "Oh, our growth is viral, hence we will be the global star. If they continue at the current trajectory, and we will be." Then you're fooling yourself. So if you look at the way we did it, so we focused on the product, but we also did paid user acquisitions on Facebook and Google. We still do it, and that we have positive unit economics. So we are spending quite some money on paid user acquisition. We have organic growth for sure, but our growth is not just organic.
Okay. And let's link it to your funding side. When you are raising funding, what has been the pressure or directive from the investors, or what has been your story as FishBrain, or you think a startup story needs to be, when you're building networks, like vertical networks like this, is it easier to get funded for traction or for building the product? Has that question come around?
Of course it has. And here you have to be clever as an entrepreneur, because investors, they want to be extremely data driven. But again, you have to sell. You have to be good at storytelling. You have to sell them a vision, because no matter which company you're looking at, not all the metrics will be great. That's not even for the super valuable successful companies. So I think you need to frame the discussions.
Okay.
But it's fundraising definitely depends on at what stage you're fundraising. If you look at angel, it's 100% storytelling. Then the degree of storytelling goes down for every funding round. Our previous round, where we raised 250,000 SEK, that was less about still some storytelling, but it's also very, very metrics driven. We would not have been able to raise that round if we didn't have a working monetization strategy. We would not been able to close that if we didn't have positive unit economics. So we are not profitable. So it's many companies at our stage aren't profitable, but then you have to compensate that with 50% plus growth year over year. So I would say for every stage, if you start with 100% storytelling, by stage that goes down, but it's still important. And storytelling is still important because there are a lot of investment opportunities for investors. So you still need to sell them on the vision. Why, if you're looking at VC funding, they want to see at least a 10x return on their money, or an opportunity for 10x. That doesn't mean that every investment will, of course, return 10x, because some will fail. And it's why it's called venture capital. Some will fail. But then you have to tell them and show them why this can become return 10x on their investment. So it's a combination of showing strong numbers and storytelling. In the early days, it's 100% storytelling.
Got it. So I think that's a good lesson for everyone. Initial stages, if you are very early stage, storytelling, focus there. I'll bring in Marina now to get some audience questions. We have 5-7 minutes to close on. So Marina, I'm putting you on presenter mode if it's okay. Let's see if we have some questions coming up. Yes. Hold on, we can't hear you yet. Yeah.
Yes. Hello.
Hi.
Hi, Nimo, and hi, Johan.
Hi.
So cool.
Hey there.
Go ahead. Hello.
Hi, now we're all set, I guess. I just wanted to say thank you so much for this super insightful conversation. I think Johan brought us such a fresh perspective, like the raw entrepreneurship, like the real stories behind your, amazing ventures and adventures actually. Sounds super, super cool. And I saw in the chat that many felt that were super inspiring to hear about your story. So I will just start with a question because we have some very good question and very little time. So yeah, let's start with Mark. Mark was asking if you have any thought about talent, how to separate the wheat from the chaff when it comes to epiphanies, process mistakes. What's your take on talent in the startup process?
It's a good question, but also a hard question, because it really depends on, also coming back to at what stage you're at. Because when you're in the early stages, you want more generalists. If you look at from a tech perspective, maybe they can work on both Android and iOS and backend, and as you grow, now that we are more than 100 people, your role become more narrow, and you can hire more specialists. So in the early days, you definitely want to find people that are willing to work 60, 80. That it's easy to talk about work-life balance, but in reality, in the early days, screw that. It's very competitive. That doesn't work. I wish that was the case. I think that's one reason that Silicon Valley is still some cases better than Stockholm, because they are willing to roll up their sleeves and work like crazy. And speaking with the founding team of Facebook, they weren't working 40 hours a week. But again, at the stage we're in right now, we need to find people that have done things before. We need to find a good mix between, I love to see people growing at FishBrain. So it's not that we're just hiring senior people. We want to have a mix between junior and senior. So our CTO is coming from Spotify. It's great. He's been through that journey. Wanted to join something smaller. But we have also people coming fresh out of university. So finding a good talent. But in the early days, you're definitely looking for the generalists that are definitely willing to work extremely hard. You still have to work hard at FishBrain today, but again, it's different. I would say that running a startup or a scale up, it's a marathon. But of course, there will sprints along the way. There will be weeks where definitely you need to work more than 40 hours. And I think what's hard for many companies as you scale, there are companies much bigger than FishBrain, and how do you keep this entrepreneurial spirit in the company, which is super hard. No one has really been successful with that, and I don't think there's a recipe for it. But because you want to keep the entrepreneurial spirit as long as you can, and I think breaking it down to smaller unit cells and stuff like that, that's definitely helpful for us.
Sounds great. Yeah, very good perspective. It's an interesting layer with talent and innovation, and where to add velocity, as you said, in the hierarchy of where to innovate. Definitely what type of talent you have at which stage definitely maybe helps in that. I will move on to Patricia Alvaro's question. She has a very good question about the future plans for FishBrain when it comes to the climate crisis, where like the major challenges with marine ecosystems, and how you're contributing with your great data.
So this is I didn't think about this at all when we started the company, but now 7-8 years later, I'm very happy that we are actively contributing to this, and in a number of ways. So first of all, we haven't engaged because anglers, they care a lot about the environment. These are outdoors people. So one way we're doing is we're actually leveraging this community. So we had one initiative where we partnered up with Keep America Tidy. So we told our users during this weekend, when you're out fishing, why don't you clean the waters? And we have hundreds of thousands of waters in the state being cleaned by our community. So I think the power of a community that cares enormously about the environment, that's a good thing. Second, since basically almost all fishing, a lot of fishing today is catch and release. We work with U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service around endangered species, because unfortunately there are endangered species. And when a user tries to log a catch in FishBrain of an endangered species, which we identify from the picture using image recognition, which we co-develop in Google, which is super cool, we can tell the user, this is an endangered species. Please consider doing catch and release. And then we share that data back with that organization, so they can actually much better track the health of these endangered species. Okay. In Florida, they have the opposite problem. They have more problems with invasive species instead of endangered species. So here, if a user catches an invasive species, the recommendation is kill it, not practice and catch and release. And then they can see how these invasive species are spreading, and they can take measures based on that. So we share data with a lot of research organizations around this. We do this pro bono. We don't charge for that. We made a board decision we don't charge for that. Of course, all the data is anonymized. We'd never share any personal information. But I'm very happy that we contribute with that. But frankly, I didn't think about that from the beginning. So it's I won't make that up. It's just happy that we are today, but we didn't think about that in the beginning.
Yes, so great. Actually, you built something that will help a lot in what's coming next when it comes to environmental challenges influencing hobbies and lifestyles. Sounds super cool. And I will move on to Maria Lindstrom's question. She said, it would be great to hear Johan's reflection on going from visitor coming to the website on a regular basis versus taking the step to build vertical community model. Where to start, where to get started?
There is no easy answer to that. It's I'd say grinding. Try a lot of things and expect 9 out of 10 features you build to not be successful. That's how brutal it is. But one thing I would say, something I wish we did more in the beginning was spend time with. I think you touched upon the 9 before. Is that spend time with customers. We were, and this is my mistake with background in mathematics. I think we were too data driven too early. I think we would have benefited more from doing qualitative analysis versus quantitative. Actually, speaking with anglers, more than being data driven too early.
Okay.
Because again, it's about product market fit, but finding a subset of users and building a product that they not just like, they have to love it. And exactly. I think a lot of startups making the mistake of trying to go after because they are told by the investors they ask them about what's the TAM, what's the total addressable market, and then they try to go after that immediately, which is I think that's the worst mistake. I think that's a terrible mistake. I think it's about finding what's the smallest subset of users that you can go after and build a product that they love, not like. Yeah. Like is not cutting it these days. And make sure that they love it. And only then should you expand to your complete time. We haven't done that yet. We are basically 8 years later. We are focused on the US market. We haven't started global expansion yet, which is because there are so strong network effects, and the higher density we have, all the metrics look better. So again, trying to narrow it down at the slimmest possible cohort that you can go after and build a product that they love and engage with that audience.
Sounds great.
Excellent point on product they love. So I think that's a beautiful point. I think really good. I have to jump in. I look bad over here, but we are overrun by 4 minutes. Some people have already requested and they have logged off. So maybe we can take one, or I don't know, Johan, if you have a couple of 4 minutes, maybe we can take one more question or we can close it. How does it look, Marina?
I can go a few more minutes.
Then it would be great. Then maybe we can do like a shooting, I will just shoot the question and you shoot your answer. Let's try that. We have a follow-up question from Patricia Alvarado again, and she's asking how many users were subscribers at the first round of investing? If you can remember. Zero. Awesome. Great. Morgan Scarin asks, Johan, how would you build a social vertical for food and cooking?
Okay.
On the spot. On the spot, building your company.
Oh yeah, one thing though is this, because I get approached at least by 2-3 founders every week. They say they want to build FishBrain for XYZ, and even though I'm of course very bullish in general, I really believe in the unbundling of social. It's happening, but one thing I've learned is the devil is in the detail.
Yeah,
for example, you have to look at the passion, the hobby. What's the natural cadence of that hobby? What are the user behaviors today? I've been advising quite a few vertical social network, and you would be surprised how different the dynamics is in these verticals. So there's no way to generalize that. You really have to look specifically into the vertical. What's the existing behaviors? How can you make that easier, better, whatever, more exciting? So you cannot really generalize here.
Yeah, that's a great insight, though. Like, it can work. You have to look into it, though. It won't be the same as yours. The last question will be from Peter Huskin, who's asking, how important is segmentation customers via the software like Braze and Link? I didn't understand the question. I think you did.
Yeah, I do. Yeah, so it matters. So at the stage we are right now, super important. So we use Braze for CRM, and we do segmentation because those tools are made for optimizations, not for innovation. I think actually some companies, they bring on too many tools too early. Because that's only recently I think a year ago we implemented Braze. Didn't have it before. We didn't need it because it was so much less about optimizing things than actually innovating. Yeah. So I think these tools some of them are great, but be careful not to have a too complex tech stack and too many tools, and making sure what you're optimizing for right now. And in the early days, you're not optimizing on the few percentage point. You're talking about 10. You want to improve retention with 50%, not with 5% or with 0.5% where we are right now or something like that. So there are great tools there, but make sure you implement them at the right time. And mostly I actually see companies implement too many tools, technology too early.
Thank you so much. That was it for today.
Brilliant.
Thank you. So
I think great learning on that, on tools. I think even at early or mid stage or whatever area of the startup you're working, keep it simple, keep focus on execution, and keep the passion going and drive forward. So too much tools, I think that's a very good point that you make over there. Big thank you, Johan and FishBrain, for being here today. Big thank you from Startup Grind Stockholm community. Thank you so much, Marina, for taking the questions. Thank you, the community that has been out there and raising the questions and sticking with us and following the discussion. Thank you all. Everyone, you're awesome. Johan, have a big thank you from me as well. It's been an awesome talk. Really learned a lot of interesting points today.
Thanks a lot for your great questions.